you have to lean into the pain of your doubts and fears.
Yeah.
Can you tell the crowd kind of why that's significant?
Well, I think you have to have a strategy. For everything you do, it's good to have a strategy of why you're doing it and how to do it. Sometimes you need a tool, you know. You can drive a hammer with a rock, but you can drive a nail with a rock, but a hammer works a whole lot better. Now they have nail guns, you know. A tool is good. And for me, when I'm in a situation, we all have doubts and fears. Everybody has doubts. And then maybe you don't like to call it fear. Every now and then you might have fear. I don't have a lot of fear, but I do have doubts. Should I do that? Can I pull that off? You know, is this the right time? Those kind of doubts. And what I've learned is I just stop and figure out what's the right thing to do. And then just start moving toward it. Not away from it, not holding back. Just move toward start doing the right thing. And you can't ever go wrong. And that's how I do it, is I say, this may be painful, if it may feel unnatural. I haven't looked over here lately. It may feel unnatural, but start moving toward it. If it's the right thing to do, figure out a plan. Don't just do a knee jerk, and start moving toward it. That philosophy has helped me more than anything else. That strategy has helped me more than anything else I've ever done. And I can't recommend it highly enough. Figure out what the right thing to do and just go do it. Just do your duty. Do your responsibility. I mean, you know, people talk about heroes. I haven't talked to any heroes that thought they were heroes. That day, our job was to do this. Or for me, 1,955 days, my job was to be a loyal American soldier and do the very best I could. That was it. And that's what I did. And some days I did better than others. You know, nobody's perfect. But that's the best I could. And our leaders understood that. Our leaders up there, you know, they took the worst beatings. Reisner was tortured, over and over, and beaten over and over. He always bounced back and kept coming back, doing his very best to beat the enemy, to resist the enemy, and to lead.
Sir, that's a great segue into my next question. I know from talking to you that you recall General Reisner's guidance. Nearly every book I've read from somebody that was a POW in Vietnam just recalls it to a T. Can you tell the crowd what that guidance was and what that meant to you as a junior guy?
Reisner came up with this simple thing that a couple of my buddies said, I was so down, and one of my buddies had both arms broken, his jaw was broken. He's laying naked on a slab in the Heartbreak Hotel of the Hanoi Hilton in the wintertime. And he said, I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And Reisner called out across the hall and said, who's over there? And he said, John Reynolds. He said, who's over there? And he said, Robert Reisner. He said, I knew who Reisner was because he was famous. He said, well, John, I'm the senior ranking officer here, and here's what I want you to do. And this is what he told me. Be a good American. Live by the code of conduct. Take torture to resist up to the point of permanent physical or mental damage. Do the best you can. Then go ahead and give in. Give as little as possible. And what he learned was you had to give in before you lost your will to fight. You had to stay in the fight, even though you said, I'll give. You give, but you cheat. You don't really give, okay? And so give as little as possible, and then bounce back, because they're going to come after you again. Stay united through communication. Pray every day. Go home proud. Very simple. Very powerful. Be a good American. Live by the code of conduct. Resist the enemy. They're going to knock you down. Bounce back. Stay united. Stay together. Stick together. Keep your teamwork. Stay in communication. Pray every day. Go home proud. That was so powerful. As a leader, when you can take the whole piece and kind of boil it down like that into the culture that you want, it is so powerful because people can remember it. And if they know everybody else is doing it, I can tell you, I asked Smitty Harris. Smitty was by the way, Reisner had been there 2 years when I got there. Smitty Harris was one of my long-time cellmates, Colonel Carlisle Harris from Tupelo, Mississippi. And I said, Smitty, in 1966, you had already been there a year and a half when you went to the Briar Patch, and I know how bad it was at Briar Patch. I didn't get there until 67. I said, how did you do it? How did you make it through that? They were torturing people every day, and the food was so bad. A bunch of you had berry. He said, well, Lee, you know, in a way, we're competitive, and we just want to be as good as our teammate was. And so to a large degree, is that if he can resist for 2 days, then I'm going to resist for 2 days and maybe go 2.5 days. And it was just part of who we are. We just, we want to do the best. We want to be excellent at what we do. And if it's resisting the communists in a POW camp, then we're going to give it our best. And that's pretty powerful to have that attitude. And that spread, and nobody wanted, he said, none of us wanted to be the person that let our teammates down. We didn't want to let our teammates down.
So a lot like that same guidance, almost everybody that I've read talks about the church riot. Can you tell the class about the church riot, what it was, and what it meant to you as a group?
Well, the church riot, that's what we called it. But it was in somewhere maybe February, March of 1970. Now, we all moved back. After the Sante raid, they got scared, and they put 330-something, basically all the POWs in the Hanoi system, except for about 30, 40 Army guys who were on another part on the edge of town that we were never with. And they put us all in the Hanoi Hilton in big rooms that were about 25 by 65, about 1,800 square feet, and we had 40 to 55 guys in each one. So we got united, and we had church services every Sunday and all, but Reisner and Denton and Stockdale and McCain and Bud Day and all the troublemakers and the senior guys were all in cell 7. And so we had these concrete sleeping slabs that were about maybe 3 feet off the floor, and that's where we slept. And so whoever was leading the service and everybody would sit up on that slab, and one person would stand up, and the church service was like typically, the 23rd Psalm, and somebody would give a 5-minute sermon homily, and they might softly sing something, and that was about it. But the camp officer told them not to do it because he said it looked like when they had the same thing, by the way, 2 nights a week, and it went 2 hours. They had it was like old-fashioned camp meeting, 2 nights a week, and they would get in there and preach. The Communist Party leader in the camp would preach to them for 2 hours, 2 nights a week. We could hear them outside across the wall. So they thought this was propaganda, brainwashing type stuff, and that's what scared them. So they said, no, you can't do that. And so the guys said, we're going to do it anyway, because they had stopped the torture in the previous fall. That's a few months earlier they stopped torture. So they said, well, we're going to do it anyway. So they did, and they came in, and they took Reisner and the other 2 guys that were leading it out. And when they pulled them out, then the next senior ranking guys jumped up and started singing a song with the next verse of the hymn they were singing, and this went to the next one. They pulled those 2 guys out, and the next 2 senior guys, so they went through about 3 or 4 senior ranking guys, one after the other, doing this. Well, that afternoon, it kind of escalated again, and that's when Bud Day jumped up and sang the national anthem, and somebody yelled, this is room 7, where is room 6? And then room 6 sang it and said, this is room 6, where is room 5? And it went all the way around from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And then we all went together, and there's like 330 of us in downtown Hanoi sang the Star Spangled Banner. And that blew their mind, because you imagine how loud that was right downtown Hanoi. So they came in with riot gear, helmets and gas masks and all this stuff on, and they put guards in every cell, put 10 or 15 guards in every cell with their bayonets fixed and all. So that was the famous Hanoi church riot, and that's the one when somebody, I guess Ross Perot or somebody asked Robbie Reisner later and said, well, how did you feel when they were dragging you out back to the Heartbreak Hotel there? How did you feel when you heard all those guys singing the national anthem? And he said, I felt like I was 9 feet tall and I could whip a bear with a switch. So that's why Ross Perot got permission from the Air Force, and at the Air Force Academy, there's a 9-foot tall statue of Robbie Reisner. That's the story.
Great story, sir. I love that one. All right. To paraphrase Bull Halsey, when he was asked how he won the war in the Pacific, he said, there's no great men, just great challenges which ordinary men out of necessity are forced by circumstances to meet. Based on your experiences in Hanoi, do you agree or disagree with Halsey on that point?
I agree and disagree.
Sounds like a
Both.
new CSC paper.
Yeah.
Sir. That's good.
I mean, there are great men and women who appear great every day. But the reality was that guys like Reisner and Denton and Stockdale and Garino, these guys had been in World War II or came in right at the end of World War II and were in the Korean War. They had been trained as leaders. They were 05s. And Reisner actually made 06 just shortly after being captured on the outside, not inside, but on the outside. So these guys had been well schooled in leadership. They had been leaders. They had made mistakes and learned as leaders and grown from other leaders. So they had been developed. But at the same time, they got to those positions because they had a lot of qualities that are important for leaders. They were big on mission and pretty big on people, and they had really good character. So if you got good character and you can get the mission done and take care of the results, and you can take care of the people, then you have really the great foundation for being a great leader. It's not that complicated. People are always looking, well, it ain't easy. It's not complicated, but it's not easy. Most of us are wired up to be strong on mission, not so strong on people, or strong on people and not as strong on mission, being the tough side. So that's where it gets more difficult. But we had people who were strong, but they're also well groomed, I think. And that's why I wrote the book, because I felt like we would never see another situation where courageous servant leadership would play that vital a role, with that clear evidence on the back end of what they accomplished. They led us through that to return with honor. That's pretty good record of achievement that they did in those circumstances. And so I attribute that to both the fact that they were good folks to start with, but they'd also been well schooled.
Sir. Skipping ahead a little bit to your release, sir, one of the pictures in the video that you sent me that you said was important was a newspaper clipping, and it shows you in the cockpit of the Hanoi taxi on the way home. Can you tell the class why that was important to you?
Well, we had taken off, and of course we all started yelling and stomping when we got airborne in Hanoi at Jilam Airport, and that was exciting. And then when we got feet wet, when the pilot called feet wet over the intercom, we started yelling and stomping the floor again. And then things kind of settled down, and we started going up to the cockpit. So I'm going up to the cockpit thinking, okay, there'll be a full colonel in the aircraft commander seat of this 141, lieutenant colonel in the right seat. And I go up there, and there's a junior mid-captain in the left seat, and a first lieutenant in the right seat. I'm thinking, man, the Air Force has changed a lot since I was around. But to be flying again, to be up in the cockpit, you know, all my life I always wanted to be up high and look down at all that stuff, you know. To me, that's one, even today flying in an airliner, there's just something, we take off and you can look over your shoulder and look out the window and know you're airborne. That's an exciting feeling. And to be up in that cockpit and to realize that I was flying again. I wasn't in a cell. And that was almost as much, maybe more so than getting airborne, that was like freedom to me. And responsibility. That our Air Force gave this captain that kind of responsibility, and he handled it beautifully. So it was just a lot of good things going on in that. And it was taking me home.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sir, you and I talked last night. So for 5.5 years, you're sitting in the Hanoi Hilton, and you're building expectations about what's going to happen when you get out, who you're going to see, what you're going to do, how they're going to act, where you're going to go. Can you talk about kind of the difference between your expectations and the reality of that as you returned home?
Well, we had thought a lot about going home. 5.5 years, and I'm one of the short long-timers. And most of us are there more than 5 years, and I'm one of the short guys of that, because a lot of them were there 6.5, 7.5. So we talked a lot about what it's going to be like. We tried to get ourselves ready to go home. Fortunately, the last 2 years, and I don't have time to go into the reasons, but someday you need to know the reasons, but the torture stopped. And we had 2 years live and let live to kind of decompress with people who had gone through the same thing that we had. So we had not much PTSD. We'd kind of gone through all that, shed the anger, worked through a lot of those issues. And so I felt like we were really ready to go home, but we had no idea what it was going to be like. But we had done so much mental work. which we didn't have no radio, no TV, no cell phone, no nothing, no magazines for 5.5 years and longer, that we had done so much mental homework. One time I spent 2 months planning a farm, and I started out with 40 acres, and at the end of 2 months, I owned almost the whole county. You know, I could set my prices, I didn't have to pay any taxes. So that kind of mental work gave us a lot of confidence coming home, and that we could handle most any problem that came up. I mean, after you've been a POW, what kind of problems are there, you know? The biggest problem I had in adjusting was keeping up with my car keys and my sunglasses and my wallet and stuff, because I had nothing to keep up with all those years. Now I got stuff to keep up with. And the other thing was making little simple, innocuous decisions like, which type of cereal do I buy? There's 100 kinds of cereal here. Which kind of deodorant do I buy? Those, and it's like I'd stand there and almost get paralyzed. And finally, I just said, to hell with it. I'm going to try this one. And if I don't like it, I won't buy it next time. Because I don't want to waste my time standing here trying to make a decision. But that was amazingly, making those choices amongst all the choices was kind of a hard adjustment. But that was a good kind to have.
Sir, several years later, you went back to the Hilton. Did that visit meet your expectations, and what kind of emotions did it stir when you went back?
Well, I went back for the first time a year ago this winter. Well, it's February the 28th, I think is the day I went back to the Hanoi Hilton. I can sum it all up by saying what you see in the Hanoi Hilton today, there's only half of it left. Half of it is in high rise. The other half is like it originally was, with the walls and everything just like it was. The cells pretty much just like it was. But they've made into a museum, and the museum tells how terrible the French treated them, which I don't doubt, and how wonderfully they treated the Americans. So they took the very best of everything they ever did for us, and they always had a picture taken. Like if it was a special holiday, they would give us a special meal once, twice a year. So you got to pick up your meal, and a cameraman would pop out and take a picture. And of course, that's the way we were fed every day. So it was all propaganda lie, and I just hate lies. Lies undermine our freedom. Lies are always meant to deceive, and that's what it is. On the other hand, what I saw in Vietnam was every day we are winning that war, because they don't like the Russians, they don't like the Chinese, they don't like the communists, and they're becoming a market economy, and they're becoming more like us every day, and they like us. So I see that every day that goes by, we're winning, because there's enough freedom there that spirit of freedom is flourishing, and they really like Americans. And there's hardly anybody that remembers the war, a few old men, but not many else.
All right, sir, we're getting close on time, so that brings me to my wild card question. Is there anything else you'd like to throw out before we jump off stage? Yeah. We're here to tell our story today. You all have a story. Stories are powerful. Be willing to share your story, because they need to hear your story. You know, I met Jimmy Doolittle when I was a first lieutenant. I flew with Colonel Boots Blase and Colonel Bob Malloy, later General Bob Malloy. I learned something about life and about the military and about being an Air Force officer from their story. So be willing to tell your story, and also be willing to listen to the stories that you're going to hear for the next, this afternoon and the next 2 days after that. And just say, what is in there for me that I can use and that I can pass on? Ken Fisher sat in Polifka Auditorium, a couple of hundred yards over there, in 1963, Captain Ken Fisher. That was 4 years later, he was my cellmate in the Hanoi Hilton. And the stories he told in that cell about the POW from Korean War who came and spoke in Polifka Auditorium really inspired me in my days in the Hanoi Hilton. Now, I'm sure and I hope that none of y'all are going to be POWs, but I hope that when you're facing tough situations, you'll recall that some of the wisdom and the experiences you hear today. Maybe you'll recall that Lee Ellis said, lean into the pain of your doubts and your fears to do what you know is right and move ahead.
And you will be blessed for that. And you'll set an example for others that they'll want to follow.
Well, sir, on behalf of the class, on behalf of the faculty, and especially on behalf of the GOE team, thank you for being here. It's been an honor. You definitely embody our motto this year: inspiration, perseverance, courage. So, sir, thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.